picture this. You are neck deep in the freezing Pacific Ocean.
Oh, man. Sounds miserable already.
Right. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You haven't slept in 3 days. Your muscles are cramping so violently, they literally feel like they're tearing.
Yeah, the physical breakdown.
Exactly. There's sand grinding into, every crevice of your body. And a Navy SEAL instructor is standing on the beach, just staring right at you, screaming in your face, actively trying to get you to quit.
Doing his job, essentially.
Doing his job perfectly.
Yeah.
So your physical body is entirely broken. The tank is empty. So, what exactly is the mechanism in your brain that decides whether you stand up, ring the bell, and walk away to a warm shower?
Which sounds so good in that moment.
Oh, it's everything. Or, on the flip side, what decides whether you stay in the freezing water?
That is the ultimate question of human performance, isn't it? We spend so much time obsessing over physical limits, but in that specific moment in the water, the physical body has already failed.
Right.
The decision to stay is happening entirely within the architecture of the mind.
And that is exactly what we are tearing apart today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission for this session with you today is to completely deconstruct the ultimate operating system, the human mind.
The most complex software out there.
Truly. We want to figure out how it operates under extreme pressure, why it crashes, and most importantly, how we can actively reprogram it. We're looking at this just a brilliant collision of disciplines today.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating stack of sources we've got.
It is. We've got clinical psychology, neuroscience, sports psychology, and ancient Stoic philosophy. And it's all anchored by some pretty intense real-world accounts of military and athletic training.
It's a profound intersection of ideas. And I want to be clear, the goal here is not merely to teach you how to, grit your teeth and endure a terrible boss or a stressful exam.
Right, because survival is just the baseline.
Exactly. Survival is the absolute bare minimum. We want to understand the underlying mechanics of resilience so you can actually thrive under pressure.
Drive, not just survive.
Yeah. We are going to explore how to achieve that elusive state of flow and how to build a psychological architecture that is essentially bulletproof. We'll be connecting the dots from Roman emperors all the way to modern fMRI brain scans.
And I promise you, as we get into the heavy neuroscience and the neurochemistry, because we are going to keep it grounded. No impenetrable jargon without a really clear explanation.
Definitely.
So let's unpack this. Because before we can optimize the mind, we have to define what mental toughness actually is. And to do that, we really need to completely destroy a massive misconception right out of the gate.
We absolutely do. Because, when most people hear the phrase mental toughness, their brain instantly conjures up an image of physical toughness.
Oh, 100%.
You picture an Olympic powerlifter deadlifting an impossible amount of weight, or, someone running a 100-mile ultramarathon through Death Valley. We constantly conflate the physical output with the mental input.
We think of the superhero, basically. But when you look at the clinical research from sports psychologists, specifically, we're looking at the foundational work by Jones, Hanton, and Connaughton. They just strip all that physical imagery right away.
They do.
They define mental toughness strictly as a psychological edge. It's an internal mechanism that allows you to cope better than your opponents with demands, remaining consistent, focused, and in control under pressure.
Notice there's nothing in there about how much you can bench press.
Right. Nothing at all. It's about consistency of focus.
That word consistency is the fulcrum of the whole concept. Because, look, almost anyone can be tough for 5 minutes.
Sure.
If you get a massive spike of adrenaline or you're highly motivated by a roaring crowd, you can endure a brief burst of agony. But mental toughness is a sustained state.
It's the long haul.
Exactly. It's how you manage your daily training, your lifestyle, your setbacks, and your competition over months and years. It is essentially an intermediate belief system.
A belief system. Okay, expand on that.
It's a system that automatically interprets challenges not as threats that might destroy you, but as necessary friction for your own growth.
Okay, that makes sense. And honestly, nothing illustrates this disconnect between physical strength and mental toughness better than the story of Navy SEAL sniper Brandon Webb.
Oh, this is such a great example.
It's wild. So let's go back to that freezing water. It's the middle of Hell Week in BUDS training, basic underwater demolition SEAL training. This is a full, uninterrupted week of calculated physical and mental torture designed to just weed out the weak.
Just absolute misery.
Complete misery. Webb is in this training, and by his own admission in his memoir, he came in with far worse physical conditioning as almost everyone else in his class.
Yeah, he was surrounded by, collegiate swimmers and track stars?
Exactly, D1 athletes. And he also admits he brought something else with him, a fairly sizable ego.
Which, if you know anything about military instructors, is basically blood in the water.
Oh, they smelled it immediately. The instructors wanted him gone. They singled him out, giving him special, concentrated punishment to break him. They are pushing him past the point where the collegiate athletes are already quitting.
The guys who are in perfect shape.
Right. And during one of these brutal sessions, Webb looks at instructor Buchanan, who is actively trying to force him to ring the bell, and he delivers this now famous line. He says, "The only way you're getting me out of here is in a body bag."
Just chills.
He utterly refused to process the concept of quitting. And the wild part, Webb succeeded where 6 out of 7 trainees in his class failed. The guy with the worst physical conditioning and a massive target on his back was the one who made it.
Which completely shatters that physical myth we were just talking about. Webb reveals a fascinating secret about SEAL training here.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
There is this global misperception that you have to be a genetic anomaly, a super athlete, to become a SEAL. But in terms of the purely physical requirements, the course is actually engineered so that the average athletic male can physically complete the evolution.
Wait, seriously, the average athletic guy. Because, I mean, the way it's portrayed in movies, you need the lungs of a dolphin and the legs of a horse.
It's an illusion. The physical part is just the vehicle. It's simply the delivery mechanism for the real test. The training is entirely psychological. It is perfectly engineered to push your mind to the absolute brink over and over again, stripping away all your comfort, your sleep, and your ego until your mind either hardens and adapts to the new baseline or until it completely fractures. The test is in the mind. The body is just the collateral damage.
That reframes the entire concept for me. Think about it like a computer network.
Okay, I like this analogy.
You can have the most expensive, high-end, state-of-the-art physical hardware in the world. You can have the titanium chassis and the liquid cooling. That's the collegiate athlete's body, right?
Right.
But if your psychological software is buggy, if it's programmed to crash the exact moment it tries to process a high-stress application, the whole system goes down. A $100,000 server is completely useless if the operating system panics and shuts off.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. The hardware is subordinate to the software. And this is exactly why mental toughness shares so much DNA with the concept of grit.
Grit, which gets thrown around a lot.
It does. But grit isn't just stubbornness or blind endurance. It is a highly optimized piece of software. It's an interpretive framework. When the software encounters a bug like a failure, a screaming instructor, a freezing ocean, it doesn't trigger a fatal error.
It initiates a troubleshooting protocol.
Yes. It interprets the environmental stress as a necessary variable to process.
So if mental toughness is the resilient software that keeps the system running, we really need to understand the virus that causes the crash in the first place.
And that virus is stress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what actually is it? How does the brain process pressure? Because, we all feel it, whether we're shivering in Hell Week or just sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic, realizing we're going to be late for a massive presentation.
Right. To really decode the mechanics of stress, we have to look back to a monumental paradigm shift in clinical psychology. This goes back to the 1960s.
Okay, lay it on us.
This is the cognitive appraisal theory, developed by psychologist Richard Lazarus. Before Lazarus came along, the scientific community tended to view stress simply as an external force acting on a person, like a physical weight pressing down on a bridge.
Right, like when someone says, "My job is stressful," they're talking about the job as if it emits a radioactive stress field that just infects anyone who walks into the office.
Precisely. They view the stress as an inherent property of the environment, but Lazarus completely flipped that. He argued that stress is not a property of the event itself.
It's not.
No. Stress is a transaction between you and your environment, and it is entirely 100% mediated by your cognitive interpretation.
Oh, wow.
How your brain evaluates what is happening in real time dictates the biological stress response you will feel. He mapped this out into a rapid 2-stage appraisal process.
Okay, let's slow this down and walk through the algorithm. If my brain is constantly evaluating the environment, what is step 1?
Step 1 is primary appraisal. This happens in a fraction of a second. Your brain scans an event and asks, what does this mean for me? And you instantly categorize the incoming data into one of 3 buckets.
3 buckets, got it.
Bucket 1 is irrelevant. A stranger at the next table in a coffee shop drops a napkin. It has absolutely no bearing on your survival or your goals, so your brain ignores it.
Totally irrelevant.
Bucket 2 is benign positive. Say your boss walks by and says your last report was excellent. It's good news. It affirms your status. No stress response needed.
And bucket 3 is where the alarms start going off.
Yes. Bucket 3 is stressful, but your brain is highly sophisticated, so it doesn't stop there. Within that stressful bucket, it further categorizes the event into 3 distinct subtypes.
It drills down further.
Exactly. First, is it a harm or loss? Meaning the damage has already been done, you already failed the exam, or you already crashed the car.
Right.
Second, is it a threat? This is anticipated harm. You're worried about failing the upcoming exam.
Anticipation is usually where I live. just looping the worst-case scenarios over and over.
Most of us do. It's very human. But the third subtype is the holy grail for mental toughness. Your brain can categorize a stressful event as a challenge. This means it recognizes a difficult situation, it acknowledges the difficulty, but it perceives a potential for mastery, for gain, or for growth.
So my brain categorizes the event. Let's use the listener's daily life. Think about a massive, high-stakes presentation you have to give to your company's executive board tomorrow. My brain puts that in the stressful bucket and specifically categorizes it as a threat. I am anticipating public humiliation.
A very common appraisal.
Right. So once that primary appraisal is locked in, what is the next step in the algorithm?
The microsecond you categorize it as a threat, you enter secondary appraisal. Your brain immediately pivots and asks, can I cope with this?
Checking the inventory.
You run a rapid inventory of your available resources to fight the threat. You check your personal resources. Do I have the public speaking skills? Am I healthy and energized? You check your social resources. Do I have a team supporting me or a mentor who prepped me? You check material resources. Do I have enough time to finish the slides? And you check psychological resources. Do I have the self-esteem to handle a tough Q&A session?
So the actual feeling of stress, the sweaty palms, the racing heart, that isn't caused by the presentation itself.
No.
It's caused by the mathematical difference between the size of the threat and the size of my resources.
Exactly.
So if I see the board presentation as a massive career-ending threat, and my secondary appraisal says, I have no public speaking skills, my slides are terrible, and I have zero time, that clash is what causes my system to redline.
That's it. The stress intensity is the deficit between the perceived demand and the perceived ability to cope. But watch what happens when you flip the script through what Lazarus called reappraisal.
Reappraisal.
Imagine you initially panic about that presentation, high threat, low resource. But then you sit down, look at your notes, and realize you actually know this material better than anyone else in the company. You have all the data. Suddenly, your perceived resources skyrocket. The threat downgrades to a challenge. And that crushing, paralyzing stress transforms into a sense of productive, focused excitement.
Okay, I see how elegant that theory is, but I have to push back here because this could get into dangerous territory.
Go for it.
If the feeling of stress is entirely dictated by my own internal interpretation and my own inventory of resources, does cognitive appraisal theory basically blame the victim?
I see where you're going.
I mean, think about someone trapped in a genuinely toxic work environment, working 80 hours a week for an abusive boss. If they are completely burnt out and having panic attacks, is this psychological theory saying it's their fault because they just appraised the abuse incorrectly?
I'm very glad you brought this up because it is the most common and valid critique of the theory. And the short answer is no. Lazarus's model does not exist in a vacuum, and it absolutely does not explain the entire totality of the human stress experience.
Okay, good.
We cannot ignore raw biology or systemic reality. Individual differences in our physiological stress responses, the baseline sensitivity of your nervous system, your genetics, your past trauma, these are incredibly real and powerful factors.
Yeah.
Furthermore, some stress responses are entirely automatic. They're driven by the amygdala before conscious cognitive appraisal even has time to boot up.
Right, like if I step off a curb and a bus is barreling toward me, I'm not standing there doing a primary and secondary appraisal.
Let me just check my buckets.
Right. Is this a harm, a threat, or a challenge? Let me check my leaping resources. No, I just jump back.
Exactly. The biological fight-or-flight reflex hijacks the system to save your life. So this theory is categorically not about victim blaming, and it doesn't excuse external systemic pressures like a toxic workplace.
So what is it doing then?
What Lazarus provided was not a mechanism for assigning blame. He provided a map to find the exact point of conscious intervention. He identified the specific junction box in our psychological wiring where we actually have the agency to intervene and rewire the circuit.
That changes the perspective entirely. It's not about blame, it's about leverage.
Precisely.
So knowing that we have this specific junction box, this appraisal point, how do we actually hack it? Because it's one thing to talk about reappraising a threat in a quiet room, but when the biological alarms in my brain are screaming, when cortisol is flooding my system, it is incredibly difficult to just casually decide to appraise a crisis as a fun little challenge.
It is incredibly difficult, which is why it requires deliberate practice. And this is where we see a really fascinating convergence between modern psychology and ancient history.
I love this part.
The Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome had this exact mechanism figured out thousands of years before Lazarus was even born.
Yes. There is a quote from the Stoic philosopher Epictetus from the sources that perfectly encapsulates this.
Yeah.
He said, Men are disturbed not by things, but the view they take of them. That is literally cognitive appraisal theory. It's the exact same concept, just articulated in a toga instead of a lab coat.
It truly is. The core operating principle of Stoicism, whether you are a slave like Epictetus or a Roman emperor like Marcus Aurelius, is to ruthlessly focus your energy only on what you can control.
Right.
You cannot control the external event, you cannot control the weather, the economy, or the abusive SEAL instructor, but you have absolute uncompromising sovereignty over your interpretation of that event.
You control the appraisal.
Exactly, you control the appraisal. And the Navy SEALs utilize a highly tactical, modernized version of this Stoic principle, which they call non-reactivity or reframing.
There is a story from the sources about a trainee named D.H. Xavier that puts this into practice brilliantly.
Let's hear it.
He was going through Hell Week, and he reached a point of total physical and mental exhaustion. He was on the ground, literally and figuratively, and the instructors swarmed him. They were kicking him while he was down, screaming at him, telling him he was worthless and that he needed to quit. Xavier notes that in that exact microsecond of primary appraisal, he had a choice.
He was standing at the junction box.
Exactly. He could choose to adopt the belief that the instructors truly didn't want him there, that he was failing, and that the situation was a catastrophic threat. And he knew that if he chose that belief, his secondary appraisal would calculate that he had no resources left, and the inevitable consequence would be ringing the bell and quitting.
But he hijacked the algorithm.
He manually overrode it. He actively discarded the negative belief. Instead, he consciously chose to adopt the belief that he simply didn't care what they said. He decided that their screaming was just noise and that he was completely capable of enduring it. He took this incredibly negative, threatening external event, being verbally and physically abused by authority figures, and he cognitively reframed it as a positive challenge. He turned it into a game to prove his own internal capability.
And by doing that, he instantly bolstered his psychological resources in real time. He neutralized the threat by changing his view of it.
Just by changing the story.
But as you astutely pointed out earlier, the mind and the body are deeply intertwined. Sometimes the biological response is so overwhelmingly strong that you can't just think your way out of it with Stoic philosophy.
Right, logic goes out the window.
When you perceive a severe threat, your body dumps a massive cocktail of adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine into your bloodstream.
Which, again, is fantastic if you need the physical burst of speed to run away from a predator.
Yeah.
But it is an absolute disaster if you are trying to think logically, give a presentation, or survive a multi-day endurance event.
Exactly. Because if those stress hormones stay chronically elevated, they become toxic. Your immune system begins to shut down to conserve energy, your motivation plummets, your sleep architecture is ruined, and your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational decision-making, literally loses its ability to function properly. You lose your cognitive edge.
So when the software is overwhelmed by the chemical reality of the hardware, how do elite performers manage the biology of stress?
There's a trick for that.
This is actually my favorite tactical takeaway from the military training research. It's a physiological hack called the 4x4 for 4. It's commonly known as box breathing, and its brilliance is in its absolute simplicity.
It really is simple.
You inhale deeply for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, and you hold empty for 4 seconds. And you repeat that cycle for 4 minutes.
It sounds almost too simple to be effective, doesn't it? Like a cliché relaxation tip someone gives you at a spa. But neurobiologically, it is a profound intervention. Yogis and meditators have utilized variations of this for millennia. Just as the brain's appraisal affects the body's chemistry, the body's physical actions can dictate the brain's chemistry. It's a two-way street.
Okay, explain the mechanism there. How does breathing in a box shape actually change the brain?
It has to do with the autonomic nervous system, which has two main branches. You have the sympathetic nervous system, which is your body's gas pedal, the fight or flight response.
Gas pedal. Got it.
And you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the brake pedal, the rest and digest response. When you are stressed, the gas pedal is floored. But your breathing rate is intimately connected to the vagus nerve, which acts as the main control cable for the parasympathetic brake pedal.
The vagus nerve.
Yes. By consciously, manually slowing your breathing down to that specific rhythmic 4-second pace, you are physically stimulating the vagus nerve.
So you are basically reaching into the server room and pulling the manual override switch.
Precisely. You are sending a massive, undeniable physiological signal up the vagus nerve to the brainstem, telling it that the environment is... You cannot be running running from a tiger if you have the time to breathe this slowly.
Right, the body's like, well, we must be found.
Exactly. The brain receives that signal and immediately orders the adrenal glands to stop pumping cortisol and adrenaline. The heart rate drops, blood pressure stabilizes, and the prefrontal cortex comes back online. You prep the body for relaxation and intense, calm focus.
You are hacking the physiological hardware to reboot the psychological software. That is incredible.
It's a lifesaver.
And this ability to regulate emotion, to calm the nervous system and maintain a positive framework isn't just a survival mechanism for combat or Hell Week. It is the defining characteristic of elite performance in any field. There's a fascinating study we need to look at regarding Major League Baseball players.
Yes, the research on positive mental attitude, or PMA.
Right. Researchers looked at baseball players across the minor and major leagues, and what they found was that at the elite professional level, raw physical talent is essentially equal. Everyone can throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. Everyone has incredible hand-eye coordination.
The physical hardware is completely maxed out.
Exactly. What actually separates the guys who make it to the major leagues from the guys who languish and wash out in the minor leagues is entirely mental. It is their ability to deal with failure.
Which is huge in baseball.
Right. Baseball is a game of failure. If you fail 7 out of 10 times at the plate, you are a Hall of Famer. The elite players have mastered positive self-talk and emotion regulation. They maintain their PMA. They control their appraisals under the intense spotlight of professional sports.
It all comes back to that intermediate belief system. They don't let a strikeout become a threat to their identity. They appraise it as data to adjust their next swing.
Okay, so let's take a breath and synthesize what we've unpacked so far.
Good idea.
We have spent this first half talking about how to play defense. We know that mental toughness is the software. We know that stress is the virus, triggered by our cognitive appraisal of a threat outweighing our resources.
Right.
We know how to play defense against that virus by using stoic reframing to fix the appraisal and by using box breathing to physically calm the biological hardware. But, you can't win a championship or survive a massive challenge just by playing defense.
You certainly can't.
How do we go on the offensive? How do elite performers proactively prep their minds for peak performance before the stress even hits them?
To transition from defense to offense, we have to look at the neuroscience of mental rehearsal, specifically the practice of visualization.
Now, I have to be honest. For a long time, whenever I heard the word visualization, my brain immediately went to the self-help New Age aisle of the bookstore.
A lot of people feel that way.
It has this reputation of just close your eyes, visualize $1 million in your bank account, send the energy out into the universe, and it will magically manifest. It sounded like total pseudoscience to me. But when you look at the actual neurological research, this is hard empirical science.
It is entirely grounded in neuroanatomy and how the brain processes reality. Here is the foundational secret of visualization. The human brain is remarkably bad at distinguishing between a vividly imagined action and a physically executed action.
Wait, really?
Truly, when you close your eyes and mentally rehearse a movement with intense detail, your motor cortex, which is the region in the frontal lobe responsible for planning, controlling, and executing voluntary muscle movements, actually fires.
Wait, I want to make sure I understand this. If you put me in an fMRI scanner and I don't move a single muscle in my body, but I simply think about swinging a tennis racket, the exact same part of my brain lights up as if I were actually on the court swinging the racket.
Yes, the electrical signals are generated, and it goes even deeper than just the motor cortex. Vivid visualization also engages the basal ganglia, specifically a region called the putamen, which acts as the brain's fine-tuning dial for complex movements.
The putamen.
Yeah. By mentally rehearsing the action, you are literally firing the sequence of neurons required to perform that action. And in neuroscience, there is a core principle. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Right, neural pathways.
You are strengthening those neural pathways, increasing the myelination around those nerves, making the signal travel faster and more efficiently, all without twitching a single physical muscle. It is neural priming.
That underlying mechanism perfectly explains the most mind-blowing study we came across regarding visualization. We'll lay this out because it completely changes how you view practice.
This study is wild.
Researchers took a large group of basketball players and tested their free throw accuracy to establish a baseline. Then, they split them into different groups for a period of time. One group did traditional practice. They went to the gym every day and physically shot free throws.
Makes sense.
Another group did absolutely no physical practice. They just sat in a room and vividly visualized shooting free throws perfectly.
And the results are staggering.
They are unbelievable. At the end of the study, The group that went to the gym and physically practiced every day improved their free throw accuracy by 24%. The group that never touched a basketball but only visualized shooting free throws improved their accuracy by 23%.
There was a mere 1% difference in outcome between sweating in a gym for hours and sitting quietly in a chair visualizing the. It empirically proves that cognitive practice is actively rewriting the brain's circuitry.
But the research is very specific that you can't just daydream and get these results. You can't just passively think, I hope I make the shot. There is a highly precise protocol for visualizing properly to actually trigger the motor cortex.
Yes, the protocol is everything.
First, it has to be incredibly vivid and detailed. You have to engage all your senses. If you are visualizing a free throw, you need to feel the pebble grain of the leather, hear the squeak of your shoes on the hardwood, and feel the exact tension in your wrist.
Exactly. The more sensory data you input into the visualization, the more the brain believes it is real, and the stronger the neural firing. Second, you need intense repetition. You have to run the mental play over and over again until the neural pathway becomes a superhighway and the action becomes automatic.
Like reps in a gym.
Precisely. Third, you need positive imagery. You must visualize the successful execution of the movement. If you spend your mental energy worrying about missing the shot, you are literally training your nervous system to execute a miss.
But there is one more crucial element to visualization, specifically used by the SEALs and extreme endurance athletes, that really surprised me. It's not all sunshine and positive imagery. They actively utilize the dark stuff. They visualize the consequences of failure.
Yes, the strategic use of negative visualization. It is a powerful fuel source.
Right. They are taught that when their fortitude begins to wane in the middle of an evolution, when they are freezing and exhausted and on the verge of quitting, they should vividly imagine the pain of personal embarrassment. They imagine the exact look of disappointment on the faces of their family and friends when they have to go home and explain why they quit.
It's heavy.
They leverage the psychological pain of future regret to override the physical pain of the present moment. They use the dark stuff to manually inflate their secondary appraisal resources.
It's a brilliant, if intense, strategy. It creates a psychological backstop.
Okay, I have to ask the obvious, slightly ridiculous question here, because I know every listener is thinking, I am laughing just running the logic on this.
Let's hear it.
If the motor cortex activates when I imagine moving, and if the brain sends signals to the muscles, does this mean I can just lie on my couch, eat potato chips, vividly visualize myself running a marathon every single day, and reap the physical cardiovascular benefits? Can I visualize my way to a six-pack and a resting heart rate of 50?
It is the ultimate dream, isn't it? The completely effortless couch potato workout.
Right.
But sadly, no. The physiological reality imposes a limit here. While the neural signal generated by visualization in the brain is very real, the electrical signal that actually travels down the spinal cord to the muscle fibers is heavily attenuated. It is not strong enough to recruit the muscle fibers to contract fully. Without that mechanical tension and cellular damage, you will not stimulate muscle hypertrophy or cardiovascular adaptation. You aren't going to build a bigger bicep or increase your lung capacity while lying on the couch.
I really thought we had discovered the ultimate life hack.
However, we shouldn't dismiss the power of this entirely. What the vast body of research emphatically shows is that while cognitive practice alone won't build muscle, cognitive practice combined with physical practice is the ultimate performance multiplier. It accelerates skill acquisition far faster than physical practice alone.
But even beyond skill acquisition, there's a fascinating nuance to the mind-body connection that we have to discuss. Because while you can't visualize a six-pack, your mindset can objectively alter your physical health metrics. There's a landmark study from Harvard researchers Aaliyah Crum and Ellen Langer that proves this.
The hotel maid study. It is an absolute classic in psychology.
It is brilliant. They took a large group of hotel maids who spent all day doing strenuous physical labor scrubbing bathrooms, pushing heavy carts, changing linens. But despite all this exercise, their health metrics like blood pressure and body fat percentage were poor.
Because of how they viewed the work.
Exactly. Largely because the maids themselves didn't perceive their work as exercise. They just saw it as hard, tiring labor. So the researchers split them into two groups. For one group, they did nothing. For the other group, they gave a short presentation explaining that their daily work actually met or exceeded the Surgeon General's recommendations for a highly active, healthy lifestyle.
They basically told them, you are getting a massive workout every day.
Yes. They changed the maids' cognitive appraisal of their own daily activity.
And the results?
A month later, they measured everyone again. The group that simply had their mindset shifted, who started thinking about their work as healthy exercise, actually saw significant physiological improvements. Their blood pressure dropped, they lost weight, and their body fat percentages decreased, despite not changing their diet or their actual daily routine at all.
That is...
The only thing that changed was their belief about the activity. It proves the mind-body connection is far more deeply intertwined and powerful than we traditionally thought.
It perfectly illustrates that the software dictates how the hardware processes it.
Okay, so let's bring the timeline forward. Through visualization, we have proactively gone on the offensive and built the neural pathways. Through stoic reframing and 4x4 breathing, we have built a defense to calm the stress response.
We're well prepared now.
Right. When it is time to actually execute, whether that's stepping onto the field, walking into the boardroom, or hitting the freezing surf, what happens when all of these elements perfectly align? When the threat is perfectly appraised as a challenge that precisely matches your highly trained resource.
When that perfect equilibrium is achieved, you pass through the threshold of normal performance and you enter a highly altered state of consciousness. Psychologists call it the flow state.
The absolute holy grail of human performance.
It really is.
The term was coined and popularized by the legendary psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He conducted what is arguably one of the most comprehensive psychological surveys in history to figure out when humans feel their absolute best and perform at their peak.
And he didn't just talk to one group of people.
No, he interviewed an incredibly diverse cross-section of humanity. He talked to elite neurosurgeons, professional dancers, chess grandmasters, Navajo sheepherders, and even Japanese motorcycle gang members.
Quite the spread.
And despite their vastly different lives, cultures, and activities, they all described the exact same subjective state of effortless, fluid action.
And the objective performance metrics associated with this flow state are simply staggering. This isn't just about feeling good, it's about massive optimization. Research suggests that when executives and knowledge workers operate in a flow state, their productivity can increase by up to 500%.
Let that sink in. 500%. That means you could theoretically get 5 days of deep, meaningful work done in a single afternoon if you were locked in flow.
It's essentially collapsing time.
And the learning metrics are just as crazy. The military has studied this extensively with sniper training, and they found that being in a flow state can improve skill acquisition and learning speed by 230%.
It is the ultimate optimization of the human operating. Csikszentmihalyi analyzed all his interviews and identified 6 core factors or universal characteristics that define this state. When you are in flow, these 6 things are happening simultaneously.
Let's walk through them, because listeners will definitely recognize these from the best moments of their own lives.
Okay, number 1.
First is intense focus. Your concentration is entirely anchored in the present moment. The past and the future cease to exist. Second is the merging of action and awareness. You aren't thinking about the action anymore, you simply become the action. The dancer becomes the dance.
Third is a profound loss of self-conscious. That nagging inner critic, the voice that constantly judges your performance and worries about how you look to others, completely vanishes. You are free from your own ego.
Fourth is a distorted sense of time. This is a big one. You sit down to write some code or play an instrument. What feels like 20 minutes goes by. You look up at the clock and 4 hours have passed. Time either compresses or dilates. Fifth is a deep sense of control over your actions and the outcome, even in a highly unpredictable environment.
And the 6th factor is that the experience must be autotelic.
Autotelic, that's a term we need to define clearly.
It comes from the Greek words auto, meaning self, and telos, meaning goal or purpose. An autotelic experience is an activity that is intrinsically rewarding in and of itself, regardless of the future outcome.
So doing it just to do it.
Exactly. You are not doing it solely to get a paycheck or to win a medal or to get a promotion. You are doing it because of the sheer joy and challenge of the process itself is the reward. If the activity isn't autotelic to some degree, it is nearly impossible to sustain the focus required to enter flow.
So those are the psychological characteristics. But what I want to know is, what is actually happening inside the hardware of the brain when we hit this magical state? What does a flow state look like on a monitor?
The neuroscience of flow is truly incredible, and it completely subverts how we normally think about high performance. In 2008, a neuroscientist named Dr. Charles Lim at Johns Hopkins University did a fascinating experiment. He put professional jazz musicians into fMRI brain scans and had them play a specially designed keyboard.
While in the scanner.
Yes, while in the tube. First, he had them play memorized scales. Then he had them improvise freely, which is a classic rapid-fire flow state. When he looked at the scans during the improvisation, he discovered a phenomenon called transient hypofrontality.
Okay, that is a massive, highly technical term. Let's break it down so we understand the exact mechanism.
Let's translate it. Transient simply means temporary. It happens for a short duration. Hypo is the opposite of hyper. It means less active or powered down.
Okay, transient hypo, got it.
And frontality refers to the prefrontal cortex, which is the large, highly evolved area at the front of your brain. Specifically, a subregion called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex significantly powers down and deactivates during flow.
And what does that specific region of the brain actually do?
The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is the seat of self-monitoring. It is responsible for second-guessing, overthinking, impulse control, and self-doubt. It is the anatomical home of your inner critic.
Oh, the irony here is just beautiful. Think about this. For our entire lives, we are taught that to perform better, we need to try harder. We need to think more, analyze more, and exert more conscious control.
That's what school teaches us.
But the neuroscience proves the exact opposite. The ultimate state of human high performance, the absolute peak of our capability, requires the specific, highly evolved part of your brain that worries about your performance to literally shut off.
It is a stunning paradox. High performance is not about ramping up conscious effort. It is about getting out of your own way. When that self-monitoring region powers down, it is an efficiency measure.
How so?
Conscious processing is incredibly slow and burns a massive amount of metabolic energy. By shutting down the inner critic, the brain clears the path for fast, intuitive, subconscious neural pathways to take over. You transition from conscious thought, which processes a few bits of information per second, to subconscious processing, which handles millions of bits per second. You move at the speed of intuition.
And it's not just which parts of the brain are turned on or off. The actual frequency of the brain changes too, right? The brain waves shift.
Yes, the electrical signature of the brain alters completely. Normally, when we are awake, alert, and going about our daily tasks, our brains operate in fast-moving beta waves. But as you drop into flow, the brain downshifts into slower frequencies.
So it slows down to go faster.
In a way, yes. It moves into alpha waves, which are associated with a state of calm alertness and relaxed focus. And in deep flow, it can even dip into theta waves, which occur during REM sleep and are deeply tied to creativity, lateral thinking, and intuitive flashes of it. You are simultaneously calmer and sharp.
And we can't talk about flow without talking about the neurochemical cocktail. It is a massive drug dump.
Oh, absolutely.
When you enter flow, the brain is flooded with a highly specific mix of performance-enhancing neurochemicals. You get norepinephrine, which tightens focus and accelerates heart rate. You get dopamine, which increases pattern recognition and drives motivation. You get endorphins, which are natural painkillers that mask the physical discomfort of the exertion. You get serotonin, which elevates your mood and creates a sense of well-being.
And perhaps most interestingly, you get a rush of anandamide.
Anandamide is fascinating. It's often referred to as the bliss molecule.
It is. The name actually comes from the Sanskrit word for bliss. Anandamide binds to the same receptors in the brain as THC, the active compound in marijuana. It elevates mood, but functionally, it facilitates lateral thinking.
So it helps you connect the dots.
Yes, it allows your brain to connect disparate, seemingly unrelated ideas and formulate highly creative solutions.
So this neurochemical cocktail isn't just about making you feel euphoric, though it certainly does that. It is a biological optimization sequence. It optimizes the brain for rapid problem solving, pattern recognition, and sustained, effortless output. It sounds like an absolute superpower.
It is the closest thing we have to a superpower.
But we need to introduce a serious reality check here.
Important to do.
Flow is an incredible euphoric peak state. But human life is not a continuous flow state. You cannot be in a state of transient hypofrontality when you are filling out a complex spreadsheet for your taxes, or when you were dealing with a screaming toddler at 3 a.m., or when you are facing a massive, multi-year grinding crisis.
You'd crash and burn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we sustain mental toughness in the daily grind? When the neurochemicals fade and the flow state evaporates, how do we maintain our resilience against long-term adversity?
This is a crucial pivot. We have to transition from the acute tactical tools like flow and breathing to the chronic long-term strategic framework. When you are facing a massive long-term challenge, say launching a startup, recovering from a severe illness, or running a 100-mile race, the brain tends to look at the totality of the task all at once.
It looks at the whole mountain.
Right. And when it does that, it runs a secondary appraisal, realizes it doesn't have the resources to run 100 miles in this single moment, and it freezes. It perceives the macro threat as insurmountable.
And the SEALs have a very specific psychological framework to counter this exact freezing response, don't they?
They do, and it is commonly referred to as eating the elephant. The old riddle, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. In psychological terms, it is the practice of extreme segmentation. When you are facing a daunting, massive task, you must ruthlessly divide it into immediate bite-sized objectives. Ideally, these micro goals should fit into a 24-hour window or even a 5-minute window if the stress is high enough.
You essentially build a firewall in your mind. You refuse to let your conscious thoughts pass beyond the immediate objective. If you are running a marathon, you do not allow yourself to think about mile 26. You only allow yourself to think about reaching the next lamppost. Once you reach the lamppost, you reset the objective to the next tree.
Exactly. You are manually manipulating your cognitive appraisal by shrinking the perceived threat so that it perfectly matches your immediate available. You always have the retake one more.
Now, earlier we talked about the Major League Baseball study and how crucial a positive mental attitude, a PMA, is for regulating emotion and bouncing back from failure. But we need to make a very sharp, very important distinction here to ground this in reality, especially when dealing with long-term trauma or disease.
Yes, this is a vital nuance because there is a very clear boundary between a useful, functional, positive mental attitude and what modern psychology refers to as toxic positivity.
Toxic positivity is a massive issue in our culture. It is this forced, fake, relentlessly optimistic attitude that demands you always look on the bright side, thereby denying and invalidating actual pain, grief, or systemic difficulty.
Just pushing down the bad.
Right. And this becomes incredibly dangerous when we look at it in the context of severe health crises. Well-meaning friends and family will constantly tell sick individuals, just stay positive, keep smiling. The underlying implication is that their attitude alone will cure their disease. And conversely, if they get worse, it's because they weren't positive enough.
Which is an incredibly cruel burden to place on someone who is suffering. And the clinical research is stark and unambiguous on this. Studies examining diseases like cancer show that while a relentlessly positive attitude might make it more comfortable for other people to be around the patient, it does not result in a greater chance of a cure, nor does it extend survival times.
You cannot simply smile away a malignant tumor. The biological hardware does not care about your happy thoughts.
Exactly. The pathology of the disease operates independently of your mood. However, the nuance here is absolutely critical. While blind optimism doesn't cure disease, a specific type of psychological resilience does radically alter outcomes.
Tell us about the HIV study.
A really compelling study on HIV-positive individuals found that having high health self-efficacy, which is the deep-seated belief in your own ability to organize and execute the behaviors necessary to manage your health, along with a task-oriented coping style, were massive predictors for maintaining a health-promoting.
So a functional positive mental attitude doesn't magically cure the disease, but it gives you the psychological resources to cope better. It drives you to actually take your medication on time, to eat a healthier diet, to manage your stress, and to advocate for yourself with doctors. It improves your behavior, which indirectly improves your quality of life.
Precisely. True mental toughness is not delusional. It is not toxic positive. True mental toughness is stoic resilience. As we discussed earlier, it is about leading with logic rather than emotion.
Facing reality.
It is about looking at a brutal setback, a lost job, a terrible diagnosis, and accepting the harsh reality of it, rather than sticking your head in the sand. It's taking full, uncompromising responsibility for your response to that setback, rather than playing the victim. It's pausing at the junction box and asking yourself, what decision in this moment honors my core values, rather than just servicing my temporary anxiety?
And translating that stoic philosophy into a daily practice is essential. You can't just think about it once. One of the best practical habits for maintaining this discipline is incredibly simple. Daily journaling.
It's so effective.
At the end of the day, you sit down and write out the thoughts that dominated your mind. You audit your own cognitive appraisals. Were those thoughts helpful or were they harmful? Did you view challenges as threats or opportunities? And then you consciously choose a better, more functional thought to carry into tomorrow.
You rewrite the script.
You stop being your own inner critic and you become your own inner coach. You catch the automatic negative appraisals and you manually overwrite the code.
It is the daily maintenance of the software. And that brings us to the final and perhaps most profound element of sustaining mental toughness. Everything we have discussed so far, the box breathing, the visualization, the cognitive reappraisal, the journaling, has been entirely internal.
All in your own head.
It's about you hacking your own brain. But this final piece of the puzzle is entirely external. And it's drawn from Sebastian Junger's brilliant book, Tribe.
I found this concept deeply moving. Junger looks at human evolution and combat veterans, and he writes that humans actually do not mind hardship. In fact, our evolutionary biology is designed to thrive on friction and challenge. We are built for it. What we mind, what truly destroys us psychologically, is not feeling necessary.
It is a devastating insight into the modern condition. Modern society, with all its comforts and conveniences, has largely stripped away our daily feeling of necessity. We don't need to rely on our neighbors to survive the winter or hunt for food, but our brains still crave that deep integration. The final overarching technique for mental resilience is to find your tribe.
Finding your people.
Close friends, deep community, and shared principles. We are fundamentally social creatures, and we extract our meaning from our utility to others.
Mental resilience isn't just a solo endeavor occurring in a vacuum. You aren't just building a fortress in your own mind. True resilience is deeply, inextricably tied to our connection to others and our sense of purpose within a group.
When you are suffering only for yourself, it is very easy to find a rationalization to quit. But when your suffering serves a purpose for the tribe, your capacity for endurance expands exponentially.
Okay, let's bring this massive journey all together. We have traveled from the freezing, chaotic surf of Navy SEAL Hell Week to the quiet, humming fMRI machines at Johns Hopkins. We've completely dismantled the myth of the superhero. We've learned that mental toughness has very little to do with raw physical strength and everything to do with hacking our psychological software.
We've learned how to identify the junction box of stress and intervene in our cognitive appraisal. We know how to use the 4x4 box breathing to physically, manually override our nervous system so we can think clearly under fire.
We know how to go on the offensive, utilizing vivid, highly detailed mental rehearsal to prime our motor cortex and build neural superhighways before we even step onto the field. And we know how to create the conditions for the flow state by engaging in challenging autotelic activities that literally shut down our inner critic and flood our brains with a cocktail of focus-enhancing neurochemicals.
And finally, when the flow state ends and the reality of the long, grinding journey sets in, we know how to sustain our resilience. We eat the elephant one bite at a time. We violently reject toxic positivity in favor of cold, stoic logic. We audit our thoughts through journaling, and we anchor ourselves to our tribe.
As we wrap up this incredibly expansive deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over, building directly on that concept of necessity from Sebastian Jung. We spend so much of our lives reading books and listening to podcasts, trying to build discipline and toughness in total isolation.
Just focused on ourselves.
Right. But I want you to honestly think about the areas in your life right now where you feel the least mentally tough, the areas where you give up the fastest.
Think about the projects you abandon when they get hard, the diets you break, the habits you simply cannot stick to no matter how many alarms you set.
Exactly. I want you to consider this. Is it possible that your problem isn't a lack of discipline? Is it possible that your software isn't actually broken? Is it possible that you just haven't figured out why you are absolutely non-negotiably necessary to that outcome?
That's the real question.
Perhaps true. Bulletproof mental resilience doesn't come from simply hardening yourself to a cold world. Perhaps it comes from deeply connecting yourself to a purpose and to a tribe that is significantly bigger than your own comfort.
Because when you are necessary to others, quitting simply ceases to be an available option on your psychological menu.
That is an incredible fundamental paradigm shift to take away. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the ultimate operating system. Take these tools we've uncovered, use them to ruthlessly rewrite your own software, and above all, stay curious.